Show. My name's Josh Wade. On today's episode, we've got a really special one. This is one that we've been working on and wanting to do for a really long time, but trying to find the right person to do it. Today, I'm joined by Mary Rodwell. Now, Mary is one of Australia and in the world a leading researcher and writers in UFO and extraterrestrial phenomena. Mary, you've had a very interesting life, but I want to start out before we get into the deep nitty-gritty stuff. You were a midwife, you were a nurse in the UK. How the hell did you end up in Agnes Waters?
Very good question. Well, I will tell you this, that when I was a nurse and a midwife, if you'd told me 40 plus years later I'd be traveling the world talking about UFOs, I'd have probably sent you to the nearest psychiatrist. So there's been a big movement, and it was really my professional development that led me here, primarily because I went into counselling after I'd been a nurse, and that led me, when we moved and migrated here, I had a choice between going back into nursing or counselling, and I chose counselling. And it was counselling really that brought the very first gentleman to see me, that told me he'd had experiences where he said, there's no support groups for this. People just think you're a loony, and proceeded to tell me about his experiences, but also the experiences of his family. And because he said he came to me because he'd heard I was open-minded. Luckily, my open mind is one where if it's weird and wonderful, I've got a book on it. And I happen to have a couple of books that told me about this kind of experience. I never expected to meet anyone who'd had these experiences. But from what I'd read, and one of them was a book by a psychiatrist at Harvard University who had worked with people having experiences, and he, abduction, human encounters with aliens. And he became convinced, and this was Dr. John Mack, he became convinced it was real. And I happened to have read his book, and another one by Whitley Strieber called Communion, which was where you've got the alien face on the front. And from that, I deduced there was something real going on, especially when this gentleman was articulate, he was intelligent, his whole family were having experiences, so it plainly wasn't fantasy or hallucinations. And basically that was 20 plus years ago, and here am I working with people globally, 3,000 to date, with this experience from all cultures, all belief systems. Doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter what your profession is, you can have this experience.
Right. So I suppose there's so many layers to this, and I guess for a lot of people, if it is your first time delving into this subject, or if you've been looking into it for a really long time, obviously I think on a mainstream level we hear a lot about these grey ET, like movie style aliens, and then on the other hand, from more of a conspiracy style angle, we hear these lizard people and the people that are running the world are these reptiles from different constellations across the galaxy and that. And I think for a lot of people, for me personally, I love romanticizing with the idea. I don't know enough, but I'm always questioning, why am I here? Whether it be religion, whatever it is. But I suppose just to break it down, from your own experiences, is this movie like Alien that we see in all these different movies and that, is that what people are experiencing the most, these grey type aliens, and why? Why them?
Well, Josh, it's a very, very good question. And quite honestly, mainstream generally has got a very skewed idea of what's going on. And a lot of that, to blame for that, is Hollywood. Because for most part, apart from maybe E.T. and Close Encounters, the whole phenomenon is conveyed in a very negative, scary, if you like, profile. What I've discovered and what research is showing us is something actually quite different. The ones that are mostly seen are actually humanoids, not the greys, not the reptilians, actually, but humanoids. And the reason I say that in recent years, I was co-founded an organization called the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences. 600 in-depth questions that have been put together by psychologists, also neuroscientists in this organization. Most of the directors are PhDs in either psychology, astrophysics, physics, or neuroscience. So what we put together is an academic survey, which to date we've surveyed over 4,000 people. And what we're discovering is completely different to what mainstream understands this to be. Yes, there are greys, there are tall greys. There's one lady told me there was probably at least 165 species alone of grey. So you can't just pick one grey up and say they all represent greys. Same with reptilians. There are lots of stories that can be very scary and people's reaction to them, but there have also been very positive reports of interactions with reptilians. So we have to be careful of the cover and judging everybody by the cover and what it looks like. That may not look very nice or scary doesn't mean they're necessarily all bad. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. I think when you say humanoids, so this is interesting because I've had a few, I mean, we've all had these experiences with people that come into our life, like a random interaction, someone on the street that we may meet. I mean, I was in Italy recently and we had a guy come up to us in a grocery store, and he started talking to us straight away and gave us this information and then left. And it was like, we never saw him again. It was just, it almost felt like you go, is it a guardian angel? What are these experiences that we have with these random people that give you something and then they're gone, and you feel sort of misplaced, or you just don't know how to feel about it? Are these what you're talking about, or like what is a humanoid?
Joyce, a lot of them are walking around amongst us. So
don't say it like that. That sounds terrifying.
Well, why should it be? They're humanoid, and a lot of them are connected to us. What we've got to understand is, first of all, the history of this planet and the context that that's in. What we do know is, from a lot of the DNA whistleblower research, is that we are an intelligently designed species. In other words, we're a hybrid.
Yes. Yeah.
From indigenous DNA and, we believe, ET DNA. And they were interpreted as gods. And there are many instances with indigenous peoples that talked about the gods and the fact that they interbred with us and that we have ET DNA. So what we're talking about being visited, whether or not it's in physical form, and believe me, many people have had physical interactions with these beings, but sometimes, it's in other forms as well, either as energy or as forms that we see as in our mind's eye rather than in a physical form. We're just aware they're around us and we can feel and sense them, for example. Clairvoyant people can see them or sense them. So it can be in all those particular formats that we can see these beings. And some do walk amongst us. They come from various planets and systems. And what is, if they see someone who they think is receptive to information, they may very well, like you were talking about, someone coming up and giving you random information may not be random. They may see from who you are energetically or otherwise that you're receptive to that information. And that's how they will operate. So this is this is as normal as, any other kinds of contact. It's just that it's not talked about. A lot of people are afraid of mentioning that maybe they've had this experience because, who's going to believe them?
Well, that gets to my next question that I know we're straight into it, but why is it being swept under the rug? And if it is being swept under the rug, is it for political reasons?
It's a good question and very complex, and certainly it is. It's all of that. The bottom line is that those behind the scenes, and I'm not talking about the government that you show. Yeah. I'm talking about the ones that pull the strings.
Yes.
Whether you call them the secret government, covert agencies, etc., all of that.
Yes.
They have known for many, many, many years, at least in the last 80 or 90 years, that this is real. The only thing was, and I mean, why was Roswell covered up, for example. It was covered up initially because they didn't know how people were going to react. They didn't know enough about these intelligences to come out publicly. But when they had the technology and reverse engineered some of the technology of these crash craft, they suddenly realized the potentials on multiple levels of what this would mean to our society and the world, those that, if you like, at the moment control the world through oil and gas, et cetera, politically. This would change everything. And this is what they were not keen on happening.
So is it being reconstructed now to, you know, obviously I think a lot of us see out there that there's slowly disclosure, that it's slowly taking place, and maybe not in the mainstream at least, and maybe there is some sort of psych op happening there where the information is somewhat the truth, but also filled with a lot of, I don't know if I'm sure that you've seen the Tom DeLonge type stuff. I don't know where you stand with that, but I'm very much in a position, because there will be people that will watch this, and I'm sure, I mean, you've had millions of views over the lectures that you've made online, and it's actually really crazy to see that, you know, how many people are seeing your stuff. But what would you say to people that call you out and maybe think you're a psych up, or that you're, you know, because I'm sure that happens. Like, why should we believe you?
Look, actually, it is quite interesting, as you say, that a lot of my lectures are very popular. And in fact, nobody's more surprised than me, because what you see is what you get. What I talk about is my latest research, and I go into the rabbit hole pretty deeply. All I can say to people is this: if the information fits for you or resonates for you, then there's truth in that. I'm not saying that I know it all, because it would be very arrogant, and it's certainly not true. I'm like everybody else. I'm just joining the dots. Am I being influenced by any of these organizations? No, I'm totally autonomous, and I intend to remain so. The bottom line is you have to look at what really the agendas are behind someone coming out with this. And with the Tom DeLonge and the way that it's coming through with the CIA, et cetera, well, right from the start, you've got to raise a question mark: is why is the CIA putting this out there when we know that the kind of mud that sticks to these kinds of organizations? And I would be very wary of anything that's coming out from that kind of source. I've got no agenda other than I'm a therapist and a counselor. My work is to put out information that may help people. That is my primary role before even being a researcher. I've got no agenda, because I'm not trying to sell anything. You know, the bottom line is my work is about helping people through an extraordinary experience that most of society denies them, where they can't go to the normal psychologist or psychiatrist because they'll be medicated and stuck in hospital. So where do you go where someone's going to listen and not think you're crazy? And that is why I created a CERN, because I wanted people to have professional help where they could know it's safe to come to me. What do I get from this? Most of the time, not a great deal. This is what I've chosen to do in what most people would call retirement. But for me, that is the motivation. But, you know, at the end of the day, don't believe me. I'm just putting information out there. You make of it what you will.
Yeah, I will just let anyone that's watching. I mean, I emailed you, and I'm awful with emails anyway, but I emailed you, and you know, you just came on, and it wasn't like it was I don't have to pay you to come on or anything like that. Like, you were more than happy to do it. So I appreciate it. But I suppose we've reverse engineered this conversation, because we're talking about aliens and all these different things. But like you said, there's a much deeper rabbit hole, and these beings, if they are out there, they seem to be very far down the rabbit hole. But I think for a lot of people, they're still comprehending political corruption and what is actually taking place in the world, but they haven't got to the point of connecting all the dots to getting all the way back to some sort of evil hidden hand. When we look at the world and politics now, and you look at someone like Donald Trump or Barack Obama or anyone like that, I've always struggled as a child. I mean, I remember watching Barack Obama be inaugurated, and it was this amazing thing, and I didn't really understand how it all worked, but I was a part of the process, and as a 14-year-old in Australia, it felt amazing. But as I got older, I started to sit there and think, how could someone say yes to, droning and killing 8,000 people just like that multiple times a day. All this that escapes the realm of politics and even human empathy. That's something else. So that's when I started to go down this rabbit hole a little bit further, and you hear about these reptile people and and it all sounds really, really wacky and crazy at the start. And then as soon as you start connecting the dots, it starts to become a bit more terrifyingly possible that could be linked in with some of the stuff that's going on in Hollywood with the sex abuse stuff, and then linking in with the occult and black magic. And then it all just seems to, for some reason, if you look into it, I don't know why they connect, but they do. So Mary, my question is, obviously you've had someone come to you and they've expressed, that you had an open mind, et cetera, et cetera. But when you started looking into that a little bit further and going down that rabbit hole and seeing the bigger picture, what was that like? And what was the domino that ticked that made everything go, oh, okay, I see what could be taking place here. It's not just they're not just contacting random people. There's a real agenda at play that's been at play for a very, very long, more than our lifetime.
Well, there's a lot in what you've just discussed. Yeah. And, I would have never seen myself as a conspiracy theorist, 20 odd years ago. But I have to say that the more I've learned, the more I've realized how much is covered up from multiple levels. And certainly there is a darker agenda on this planet, and what's behind that, whether or not it's psychopaths that are are orchestrating this, or they're being influenced by negative energies, whether you want to call them, reptilians, or archons, or whatever name you want to give them. Certainly people can be influenced, I'm certain of that, by negative energies, whether or not we put a form to it or not.
Yes.
So, there's no way you can dismiss that. The other interesting thing that I discovered as I was still new to this, when I was facilitating experiencer groups overseas and what have you, the most traumatized were those that had what we call human abductions. These are military orchestrated MILAB abductions, where the military, certain covert, if you like, sides of the military, have the technology to abduct people and traumatize them. And people would say, well, why would they do that? And often it's because people who've had experiences, they want to know what happens on the craft. They want to know what they're learning. They want to know what the agendas are, so that they will actually do their best to drug and elicit the other agendas they think these beings may have. They will become even more traumatized than any ET kind of interaction. So you've got all this going on, which most people are going to really struggle to believe that this is even going on. And why would, humans do this to humans? So we've got this layer as well. So as you're going down the rabbit hole, you're seeing multiple agendas, which is very complex. And some are tied together, some are not tied together. So you can't say, oh, well, these are the goodies and these are the baddies, because, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know, because I'm not part of that covert community that is doing this to people who had experiences. Certainly there are certain links to certain families, certain bloodlines. And one of them connects to there being the negative, the RH negative, for example. There's a high percentage of those with RH negative that seem to be having these experiences. But I'm not a geneticist. I can only go, and the evidence yet, or if they have it, certainly it's not out in mainstream. What I am seeing in the bigger picture is that there are many benevolent beings, as well as those that I would call perhaps self-serving. The benevolent ones that want to see a change in human society, want to see things shift and to heighten human awareness. And these benevolent ones are working with all those that are having contact. Most of them were having contact. And they're giving them information that is helping them to change the way we understand energy, the way that we understand our cosmology, the way we understand the origin of the species, healing. All these kinds of things are being taught or downloaded to these that are having experiences. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. It's not just that they're picking up on and utilizing or genetic material from people. They're also having, if you like, a multidimensional educational syllabus that people, right from small children, are being taken up on craft and being taught things, how to use their mind, how to use their energy. All these kinds of things are being taught on board craft, even with young children. Now, you've got to say, well, why would they bother to do that if ultimately there is a negative agenda there? And that is really important for people to realize that the surveys we're doing is uncovering a multidimensional, complex program for humanity, which in most cases seems to assist us to awaken to another level of awareness and our multidimensional properties, if you like, the things that we are being assisted to evolve to another level. And that is what the research that I'm participating in with Free and my own research.
So it's that junk DNA that we just don't know that's being activated, yes?
Exactly. And this is something that I write about a lot, because the background, my medical background, we wanted to know, well, where is the evidence? And certainly there are whistleblowers that have already said that they look at DNA and they can see where genes have been spliced in or spliced out. To me, it's Dr. Crick, co-founder of the DNA molecule, said the same thing, that we are a created species. Many geneticists, even if they don't do it publicly, are saying this is absolutely the case. But on top of that, we appear to have what appears to be dormant DNA, not really sure of what the function is yet. And that's 95% of human DNA that is considered junk DNA or dormant DNA. My understanding is, with those that are having experiences, they talk about being activated or their DNA being activated. So what is being activated, I believe, is more of our extraterrestrial heritage, if you like.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. I mean, I personally, and I know other people, I think we go through a big thing that everyone's going through now, or in general, we've always been going through it, but I think people take more notice now. Is a lot of people have their moments in life where they're having what they would call an awakening, or they just wake up one day and they just feel better. And for me, for a long time, I was always moping and shitty and sad and just a piece of shit walking around the earth. And all of a sudden now nothing matters anymore, as in great ways. And I almost feel this change in myself, but I'm seeing it in other people, almost like there's a massive energy shift that must be taking place right now. But I still think for a lot of people, we're surrounded by doom and gloom. And I heard someone say that genetics are not forever. So you're never really born with genes and then that's it. They stay the same. Like your genetics can change over time and they evolve, and that's why we're here. So can genes be, is there like a manipulation war going on where you have one side trying to manipulate our genetics and our DNA to become the worst of ourselves, as opposed to the other side? Because I suppose you watch the news all the time. If you watch the news every day, you're going to be an awful, sad person. That's got to be changing your DNA to some extent as well. Like,
it's actually true that what we've discovered, or at least scientists now have discovered, something called epigenetics. And in epigenetics, what they're really saying is, although we're born with genes that give us the color of our eyes, how tall we are, etc., the cell itself is intelligent, and that will switch on or switch off particular genes in our DNA. So everything we're exposed to, from our belief systems to, negative or positive energies, etc., is also influencing the DNA. So if you live in a society, and I call the news the doom and gloom show, what that does is make people feel worse. It makes them feel, hopeless. It makes them feel, what's the point? The world is going, as you say, to shit. What's the point of all of that? I believe is an agenda. And I believe that is an agenda to stop this process of us evolving. Now, what's behind that may very well be the psychopaths that I believe many of them are running this world, but also entities may be behind that as well. We don't know for sure, but we can certainly assume. We do know that when people are very depressed or very low, or they're abusing drugs or alcohol, that low energy allows these kinds of entities to operate. It gives them access to you, if you like. Instead of your healthy energy field, it lowers your energy field, gives them access, so you get thoughts that aren't yours, but you may feel they are, telling you you're not good enough, go and do something you don't really want to do, and get that kind of negative stuff. I believe things that can lower our energies and whatever there are a few of them. Chemtrails are one of them, I believe. I believe fluoride is a neurotoxin in the water. There are lots of things in our food that aren't healthy, the GMOs. Look at what you're eating. Look at what is happening with all these kinds of things that are not healthy for us. And some would believe even vaccines, particularly the numbers of vaccines. Now, when I was a nurse, we were only giving, 2 or 3 to the kids as a child. Now, goodness knows how many are out there. That kind of number with a growing brain to me is concerning, even from that point of view, even if we don't go into more of a conspiratorial side. What's that doing to a growing brain when you're having so many with a small child? Those kinds of things concern people. They need to be informed. So this keeps us at that lower frequency, and I think shuts us down.
Yeah. Why do you think that people get so defensive on all that stuff? Because you raised a whole different section there, which is an important conversation that we do need to have. I don't really drink tap water. I understand there's fluoride in a lot of stuff, but the fluoride stuff, the GMOs, all that sort of stuff. Why do you feel like people get somewhat very, very defensive? Like, I don't think they're things that we should be getting defensive about. I feel like they are genuine questions that are raised, but it just seems like that category that you just brought up then of vaccines and GMOs and all that, they're suppressed so quickly. Like, we are self-policing almost that agenda of don't ask any questions. Medicine is good in any facet, or just drink the water. Like, just shut up and just keep this thing going. I don't know why we all do that to some extent. So why do you think that is? Why aren't we questioning those things, but questioning what Kim Kardashian wore to the Oscars last night?
I think because people are fearful of being different, fearful of challenging the system. We know if anyone I just ask people to look into it. I don't take my word for it on any of this. Have a look in and see agendas. And agendas are usually greed. Power and greed. And you look at the drug companies. We already know now, and they're even suggesting some of the massacres that are going on are due to the overuse of certain psychotic drugs and what have you. And I mean, this is out there. You can look for yourself. A lot of these drugs that are being put out there, they have not been honest with the side effects of many of them. And there are many. Even Valium was not realized that it was going to be something that would ultimately control you if you took Valium over a period of time. And who's behind not letting you know that are the drug companies that are making squillions. So you have to look at what is the agenda there. I think people are frightened to go against the system. They're afraid of being judged. If they say, well, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm not okay with this. And what it is that we get it on the news. You've got to believe everything your doctor tells you. Go to your doctor for one. And a lot of the doctors, innocently, I believe, are putting this out there because they have been programmed to believe that that's the way you do it. Everything ultimately is, a lot of these people are very innocent, I think, on the ground about what's going on there. It's only when you go into it you realize that this is what they've been fed. I was fed with a lot of this stuff. Fluoride was good to give your kids. That's what I did until I learned a bit more about it. All I'm saying is that people don't like it when you challenge their belief systems. They don't like it when they have to maybe take responsibility for looking into things and maybe coming to a different conclusion that's going to put them on the outside. We do like to be the same as everybody else in some ways because it's easier than challenging the system. But one of the things I've learned by coming into this is everything I've ever believed has gone down the tube. Everything that I was educated into believing scientifically, anthropologically, archaeologically, theologically, you name it, I've had to start again because I've realized there's a whole new level of information that is not made, it isn't available to the average person through their educational systems or higher education. And when you start looking into this, it gets you down the rabbit hole where you start to see a lot more of the layers of complexity and information and the way that we are lied to left, right, and center to keep us in the cage, in the 3D box.
Do you worry, like, there's a lot of things that you're talking about here that, especially when you bring up the antidepressant stuff with, the school shootings and stuff like that. I mean, you're actually playing in a world it's a dangerous place. There's a lot of people that have gone missing, and you might wind up as one of Hillary Clinton's best mates. But do you worry for your own safety talking about this sort of stuff and being so vocal about it? Being tracked, being listened to.
Oh, look,
you're a threat to some extent.
Well, I'm a threat only in the sense I think whistleblowers are the ones that have because they can bring out the evidence. They can name names or whatever. All I'm saying is have a look, guys. Look into this for yourself, because I have, and it worries me. And it worries me because, I see how people are manipulated. I don't, I haven't had any sense that to this point that my life has been in danger, because mostly all I'm doing is supporting people who are having experiences and wanting someone to listen to them. But at the same time, as a concerned earthling, if you like, I'm concerned for my grandchildren. I want them to have a future, and I am really worried about this planet. And if we don't stand up and say this isn't okay, what's going to happen? Are we all going to just say, oh, look, it's not my problem? Or are we going to say, this is not okay? And quite honestly, if my time is up, my time is up. But I'm not going to spend my life pretending that all is honky-dory in a society that I think actually needs a real reframe on every level.
I think a lot of people, especially young people, I've had so many of these conversations with people my own age, and I think we all seem to be on the same page with these sort of conversations. And there are issues that young people are raising, but I worry that by the time we get to 25, 30, that we just fall into the same old shit that everyone else has fell into. So how then do we do that? Because I think that's the struggle for a lot of people. They question this stuff, they're interested by it, but then from that point they have the information and then they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to gather in numbers. There's a general sense of hopelessness, and there is no one. There needs to be a leader to direct, I think, a lot of people into making this change. How do you think we do it?
Well, what is interesting with the work that I'm doing, and I'm talking about the new generations as you're talking about as well, many of them can see right through the crap. They can look at you and know when you're lying. Many of them are telepathic, so they can also see the agendas and what have you. And this is what the powers that be are really worried about, and they want to shut the kids down. And, the ADHDs, the dyslexic, the Asperger's are all the new programs. What do they do with ADHD? They dumb them down as much as they can with Ritalin. But they have the ability to see through a lot of this and to actually see the truth. They also have an awareness of how to change it. So you've got some involved in working with energy. One young man told me he was a ecological engineer. He'd come from another planet and he was going to help this planet actually shift and create environments where we could live in harmony with the planet. A lot of them have, if you like, missions, and they've come in with these missions, and there is going to be a point where they will be activated into utilizing their abilities to do it. Now we're talking about stuff that you would see as superhuman almost because of this awareness that they have. They're being taught how to create free energy. They have this downloaded to them, for example. So ultimately, if there's enough out there with this awareness and understanding, it's going to be very hard to take them all out. It's just impossible. There's too many. And I think that already they're connecting. And what is happening, they call them the starseed groups and whatever. More and more of them now are connecting. Remember, they're telepathic, so they can connect with others right across the planet. And all of this can't be monitored. You know what I mean? So there is a sense that this is all being put in place for a certain point where the shift will happen. And that is where many people are feeling we're heading. There's this kind of sense. the event, some kind of event is going to happen where they will then step into their role.
Right. So it's all happening. And I mean, just to throw the backstory on it, because like, again, a lot of people look at this stuff, and if they are just joining for the first time and they're new to all this, we have to remember that the Chinese government have been looking into this stuff for a very long time. The Nazis were looking into it quite a lot. The US government has been looking into it for ages. So, and it's out there. That's declassified stuff. So, I mean, I don't know what more people need as confirmation that something is up. Not to say that we know that there is something, what it is, but that there is something going on. I saw a snippet of one of your speeches, and you were talking about the Chinese government and the psychic children and stuff like that. Do you want to go just a little bit more into that? Because I think that for a lot of people on a mainstream level sort of confirms those beliefs. If a government body is looking into something, then it feels a bit more like, oh, okay, it's not just someone that has these beliefs.
Yeah. Well, all they need to do, one of the books that talks about this is China's Super Psychics by Paul Dong and James Raphael. And in it, he talks about the fact that these children that Beijing, I think it's Beijing, they're held there, and other places where they know about these kids that can use their mind, are telepathic, can move things from one place to another with their mind, can open the bud of a flower with their mind, a whole range of what we would call psychic abilities. And they are working with these children, and they are finding them everywhere. This is also being found in Russia. There's a whole system in Russia where they know about these children as well. And they are encouraging these children to use their abilities and what have you. It is interesting also that a lot of these children, and in Mexico they found it as well, that can literally see without their physical sight. That that it's called extraocular vision. That you can teach children how to do this, and what it means is, and I've seen evidences of this because there was a course taught here in Agnes Water by a lady that had trained in Mexico. And what the children do is literally they're fully blindfolded, but they can read, they can colour in, they can tell you what's behind them. So these are the kinds of abilities that are actually now being displayed. In India, they're training them how to do this as well. There are organisations in India where children will display abilities to read literally a book within minutes. Just go onto the internet, see for yourself. I don't ask anyone to believe anything I'm saying. For me, I've had to obviously qualify it. But the bottom line is they're there, these children are there, call them super psychics, call them what you want, but there are a lot more, there's a lot more evidence there than people realise.
Okay. So, geez, there's so much to take in, I suppose, for a lot of people. Coming to terms with it then. So let's say, people are leaning now on this side of the fence that they're like, okay, there's something going on. How did you come to terms with this? You mentioned before that your preconceived ideas of the world have been shattered. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of stuff in the mainstream again about, flat earth and dinosaurs not being real and that they were placed here and all these different things, which I don't really have an opinion on those ones because I just haven't looked into it, because I just go, oh, okay, I give up. I've looked into this stuff enough that I'm tapping out now. My mind's been shattered. But for you, how do you cope with that? And then how do you make sure that you're not influenced if everything's been destroyed and shattered? How do you make sure you're not influenced by the wrong ideals or other type of psychops?
Well, it's a good question. I think not only the people that come to me, one of the main things they have to do is reappraise everything they've ever believed, because once you realize you're interacting with different intelligences, not just physical ones, interdimensional ones, extra-dimensional ones that maybe are coming from our future, by the way. Once you realize this is a reality, it changes everything that you've ever believed. And you go through the process of trying to make sense of it and put it into a new paradigm for yourself, which may be completely different to everybody else on this planet, but for you makes sense. So you look at ways of qualifying how that can be. I had to do the same, because if I believed these people, even though I hadn't had the experience, I had to look up, well, is there evidence in our DNA? Yes, there is. Is that, what other evidence is it? What are the gods? Oh, well, the gods could actually be extraterrestrial. We saw them as gods because of the technology, actually not realizing they're not gods at all. They're just advanced technologies that we're seeing. So you look at the gods and everything to do with religion and belief systems within religion completely differently when you see it from that perspective. You look at the abilities that we have where we're told psychologically you can't see anything beyond what you can touch, feel, taste, and whatever. Not real. Well, these people are experiencing all of that. So you have to then honor the fact that we are multidimensional, that our sensing and feeling and seeing and orbs, or maybe seeing energy or seeing beings, is telling us that psychology is wrong. Psychiatry is wrong because so everything you look at then is reappraised through that. And so for people having this experience, if they're living in a family where they're not believed, that they, even though their family may love them, your wife, your son, your grandpa say this is a load of rubbish, how do you live in a society that denies your reality? So that is part of it as well. And we all have had, people around us that say, oh, what a load of rubbish, get real, get with the program or whatever. And I've had it and everybody else has. So what do? You accept your 3D world, but you look for information that's going to fit in with everything that you're researching. And how do you know it's real? Because there's a knowing, there's a feeling within you, a resonance to that information. And you just think, well, it feels right. I mean, if someone, Josh, is giving you advice, for example, they may not know whether it's going to be useful to you or not, but they'll say, look, if it was me, I would do X, Y, and Z. And you will listen to that and you'll say, well, that fits for me. And then you'll take it from there because it just feels right. What I think we're being tasked to do is look at the information that's out there. And if something feels right, and for some people they may just get this goosey feeling or something like that, or their gut feeling that says, do you know what, that really fits for me? Because let's face it, we're told all sorts of things that are quite extraordinary and people don't have any evidence for them but still believe them. Like, Santa Claus, we believed in Santa Claus till we were about 7 or 8. And what happened till we realized he wasn't real? Well, the same thing with some of the religion. Taught things to believe, I don't want to offend anyone, but look again at what you actually believe is quite extraordinary sometimes with no evidence that it's real.
Yeah, exactly. So is this a multiverse? This is a double-A question. Is this a multiverse, and is our future predetermined, or are we simply just attracting energy and things change based on how we are, what we're putting out?
Good question, and there are several things I could say with that. Yes, I believe we live in a multiverse of many dimensions, and I believe we can also operate in those other ones, different timelines, parallel universes. We can operate in those as well. If you go right down to the nitty-gritty of our consciousness or soul essence, I've done a lot of past life regressions, and what I've discovered is that many people will talk about orchestrating their earth life, planning how it's going to run. In other words, putting out an agenda or a map, if you like, of what the parents they want, the siblings they want, everything that's going to help them to learn and grow. So in that, I believe it's predetermined, because I think we as a soul orchestrate it. But how we deal with it is the choice. Everything, if it's difficult, are we going to see it as more negative, or are we going to see it as, the cup half full or the cup half empty, is the choice we have with everything that we deal with. So in that sense, I do believe it's predetermined, but it's predetermined by us, or that higher self, if you like, of what we are.
So when people get anxiety about, or depressed about certain things, for anxiety, it's obviously people worrying about, they almost can trick themselves into, this is going to happen, so I've got to figure out all those, and then it never ends up happening. But they almost get into a mind frame where it almost feels like it's a predetermined thing that's been set out, and it just has to happen in life. Why is that, do you think? Why do we trick ourselves into our own predetermined future that isn't even in existence?
Well, what I think life is if you like, it's a soul journey. It's an adventure that we choose, and we may choose to be a victim in that adventure. We may choose to be a perpetrator in that adventure. We may choose a whole range of things that teach us something about ourselves. So to me, if we're getting caught up in fear, which is a lot of people on this planet get caught up in fear so that they don't do anything. Now, we have a choice around that. We can say, well, I'm not going to stay with that fear anymore. I'm going to transcend it and move to another place. Others say, I'm going to stay with this because there's something I'm still learning from it on some level. So we have to look at not what our conscious mind is doing, but what our subconscious, superconscious is orchestrating to teach us something. And just because it's painful doesn't make it bad. It just makes it painful because what it does is teaching us some way to grow. And often the way to grow is painful. When we get things right, we don't learn so much as we do when we think we make a mistake.
Right. Oh God, I just lost it. Do you ever have those just the
yes. Well, you're covering a lot of ground, really.
Yeah, I'm trying to get as much as I can into an hour, and I know there's I try and come from their point of view, and I know there's a lot of people that are watching that probably have 1,000,001 questions. But when we talk about in religion, because I've had this conversation with people before, when you hear the concept of angels and demons and stuff like that, but that just is a religion's version of a higher energy and a lower energy. Does that also link into the ET agenda, that these people that get possessed? Because I've actually seen, like with my own eyes, someone get or be possessed before, and we see it even when people go into speaking tongues and stuff like that. Do you believe that some sort of maybe not physical form of extraterrestrial, but some sort of consciousness that causes that? And is it real?
It's a good question. And when you operate multidimensionally, you're aware of energies around you. And if someone who is clairvoyant or clairaudient, and by clairvoyant I mean you're seeing spirits or hearing spirits, for example, we are surrounded, I believe, in different frequencies, other intelligences. Some of them we would see as spirit guides, we would see them as angels, we may even see them as elementals or fairies or lower energies or whatever. Sometimes these will, if you're receptive enough or you're open enough, will come close enough to actually cloak you. It's called overshadowing. And when they're overshadowing, then the consciousness of the person may move to one side, so this being may articulate something. You've got those that do this, like Bashar, for example, comes through because the person is literally, their consciousness vacates for a while. It's a form of possession, but it's one that's agreed on by the soul itself. Overshadowing similar to that. The energy will come in, and it can be a positive energy or it can be a lower energy depending on what state you're in. And you were talking about someone coming out with various things. Really, the essence of that energy is by what they're saying. So just like, you've got your friends that make you feel good of being around them, you've got friends that make you feel crap and you're really usually glad to leave. It's the same with any of these intelligences. There are some that are lower energies, they're negative energies or whatever name you want to give those. And there are those higher energies or higher beings that come close to you and give you advice. You suddenly get this inspiration. Oh, where did that come from? Well, it may have come from what some people call spirit guides. What I want to say is it's all in the same bucket. It could be an ET. An ET's, light beings, angels. Some people will say it's an angel. Somebody else will say it's a light being. It really is the lens that you're perceiving and choose to interpret whatever it is. It's all in the same bucket, though. It's not separate. It's not aliens on one level, an ET, like, angels and fairies on the other. It's actually all in the same thing, depending on your perception will be how you interpret it.
Fantastic. Mary, thanks for coming on. I want to, like I've said it probably a bunch of times today, but for a lot of people watching this and that watch my show, they're very interested in this sort of stuff. They don't know where to look. And hopefully, I can provide you with a new audience of people that will come and have a look at your stuff. Because there's so much out there that will go so much further in depth than any of my questions today. But for the people, if they want to go look at your stuff or read your books, you've got so much out there. Where is the best place to find all of that?
Well, if they want to see my presentations, just go on YouTube and you'll find a whole load will come up. And it will also help people put things together. My website's acern.com.au, acern.com.au. Also maryrodwell.com.au on my website, so you can contact me directly from those as well. They're the main ones. I'm also on Facebook. So there's plenty of ways to contact me. Yeah,
and you're very responsive, and you reply to everyone. So I appreciate that. Look, I would love to encourage people, because like I said, there's probably a lot of questions that have been raised today from some of the questions and answers that you've given that are just going to be follow-on ones. So I'd love to be able to talk to you sometime again in the future and follow up with some of the viewers' questions at some point that they have. I'm sure there's people out there that have had some crazy experiences. I know when you mentioned before about the military experiences, I actually know someone who as a child said that the military came down and took him away, and that he has some sort of metal chip inside of his head, and we all thought that he was absolutely crazy and that he went out on drugs and he's lost his life altogether now. But after hearing you say that, but having heard it brought up a couple of times before over the last year, it's terrifying to think that maybe this poor guy was
speaking the truth.
Yeah. So who knows? I'm sure there's a lot more people out there that will be open to sharing their stories and hopefully normalizing it to some extent. It's like anything else. There's a stigma around it, and if these are things that are happening, even if we get to the point where we discover that they're not these cartoon-like things that we see in movies. These are still human experiences to some extent, and whether they're made up in the mind or there is something else there, they need to be talked about, because if it is just a human experience, like some people claim it to be, then is that still not extraordinary, even more extraordinary, that we shouldn't be looking into that even more? I don't know.
I think the point you're making, and it's important to state here, is if I've worked with over 3,000 individuals, that's just the tip of the iceberg. How, all saying similar things. So if they're making it up, it's a very interesting consensus reality.
Yeah, very much so, Mary. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Go check out her stuff, and I'm sure we will talk again soon.
You're most welcome, Josh. Thank me for it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.